Hello there, fellow chess enthusiasts. Welcome back to our channel for another exciting episode of Guess the ELO. I'm your host, ThisChessDad, and today we have a special treat for you. It's time for the subscriber-submitted game edition. That's right, we're putting your skills to the test and featuring one of our talented viewers' games. Before we dive into the game, let me explain the rules for those of you who might be new here. In Guess the ELO, we analyze a game and try and estimate the player's rating, also known as ELO. Now, our community has sent in a fascinating game, and we're going to use it for today's challenge. Our job is to analyze the moves, evaluate the player's choices, and make an educated guess about their ELO rating. We'll be considering factors like piece coordination, tactical awareness, and overall understanding of the game. Are you ready to put your chess knowledge to the test? Fantastic. Let's begin our journey into the subscriber-submitted game, see how accurately we can guess the ELO. Remember, the more precise your estimate, the better. So let's get our thinking caps on, dive into the intriguing world of Guess the ELO subscriber. And as always, don't forget to like, subscribe, hit the notification bell so you won't miss our exciting chess content. Now let's get started. So, our subscriber was playing the white side of the board and opened up playing e4. Okay, e4, Bobby Fischer used to call best by test. So we've got a solid opening, and so we have a Scandinavian defense. Captured, which I think is generally pretty reasonable. Queen comes out. Often this is what you'll see in a Scandinavian game. I don't love it because the queen ends up getting attacked. This is usually pretty good for white. Knight comes out to attack. Absolutely the right idea. We're threatening to capture the queen here. And so the main ideas that we have is either the queen retreats back or can try and stay in the center for a little bit longer. But usually the queen ends up retreating back to d8 anyway. So went ahead and did it right now. So let's think about what's happened to now. White has developed a knight and traded a center pawn for another center pawn. So white is now fully a full tempo up compared to black. Gain some space in the center, d4. Nothing wrong with this so far. Black is trying to catch up on development here. Probably going to push this pawn at some point and try and find a square for the bishop, and then castle. That's my guess for black's plan. And let's see, white might be considering castling on the queen side. Might do something like this, and then castling long. But let's find out what the plan is. So far, I like white's choices. Black, I don't love the choice of the Scandinavian yet. Okay, developing the knight. If you're not sure where your bishops are going to go, developing the knights first. These are basically the two best squares for the knights. So it makes total sense to put them there. Okay, I'm totally comfortable with white's game so far. Okay, so we push the pawn. As I said, probably going to develop this bishop along this diagonal somewhere. This is kind of a square to restrain the knight here. And then probably castle short. Let's see what white decides to do, because this is probably going to indicate whether they castle queen side or king side here. So brings the bishop out. I feel like this is, I don't know, let's see. Analyze this position here. If white had decided to place the bishop here, it wouldn't have been doing much good because you've got this pawn chain here, right? So maybe this is the best move, with the idea that putting pressure here, maybe the knight will come out, and eventually maybe the queen can come in here once this knight gets removed. Yeah, not a bad move. I'm okay with it. Um, if this pawn hadn't been here yet, I might have said that it might be better to be on c4. The check isn't worth giving because the pawn would just come out and chase the bishop away. So yeah, I think bishop to d3 is actually a really reasonable move there. Interesting. So black is now playing very passively. So they opened up the position very quickly playing the Scandinavian, and now are playing a little more passively. It's not a bad move. It just feels slow. It feels like you're already down the tempo and you're just letting white finish development a little bit ahead of you. So castled, like I said, indicated basically on the last move, the bishop move told us that we were going to castle on the king side. I think there's nothing wrong with that. Might have given you a few more options if you had considered bringing your bishop and your queen out and then deciding to castle. I usually consider it best to castle early, castle often. But you kind of know black's going to castle over here. If you know black is going to castle here and you're going to try and break open this, it might have been better to think about, again, supporting a bishop, castling long. Here, let's see if we can actually show that. So if we're here, we like that move, we're saying, oh, we're going to castle, black plays, and now if we think about, here, let's get rid of these arrows. Now let's think about something like this, followed by a castling, push your bishop up, and then castling long. I feel like these pawns are going to be able to get really moving down the board and crack this position opening. You're ahead in development, which means your attack is going to be a better supported attack. So nothing terrible with what your choice was. So castling here, again, I don't think it's a bad move. I just think you already know what black's going to do. Maybe try and attack that position in some way. So black castles, and now the bishop comes out. So it's a good square for the bishop. Puts pressure on this knight, possibly trading the knight if this bishop moves somewhere. E4 might come in here to really put pressure on that knight. Again, these three pawns here, while they're sitting there strong, it's going to be hard to break into it. So maybe making a trade where this pawn has to take here, opening up this center file here, really putting pressure on the king. All right, so solid position, pretty even still. Interesting. Well, reasonable position here. This bishop is blocked in by the pawn, so probably not going to be able to get out in that direction. So fiend shadowing the bishop really seems like a reasonable idea here. Again, black is still behind on development, so really has to make some intentional moves here to get the development finished. Here we go. So where's the knight? The rook want to be? I don't hate this rook being here. It's on an open file. But this pawn isn't going to be moving anytime soon. So maybe the idea is to bring the rook over and then swing it over to try and attack the pawn at some point. Let's see. What do we think would have been better? Is there anything we liked any better here? I mean, there was my original idea to bring the bishop, the queen, to support the bishop. There might be an idea that if this pawn pushes, you can sack, and then you have your bishop and your queen both pointing over here at an empty king side. That would be pretty nice. Let's see, what other moves might we consider here? Yeah, I like the queen move. Not really sure where the pawn break is going to come in yet. The rooks might want to be on the D file instead of the E file. So I usually like to try and clear the whole back row of all the pieces before I start moving my rooks. Just gives you a little bit more sense of like where's the best place for your rook to go. So rook went to E1. I don't think that's a terrible choice. Knight trying to attack the center here, restricting where the rook can go. I don't hate that move. Interesting. I'm not sure what the point of that one was. Let's see. What's black threatening? Anything? So this is probably a slow setup to be able to push this B pawn and try and restrict this bishop. I think you would have been better off moving the queen and maybe putting your second rook here on the D file, finding a good place for this knight, and then push your center pawns. If you're not going to attack on the king side, you should probably attack in the center. Again, you've got the lead in development, so the A pawn move just feels really slow and doesn't really accomplish anything. If the bishop was here, sure, that kicks the bishop and you kind of gain a tempo on that. But I don't quite see what A3 does for you. Maybe the idea is that you want to move the knight and don't want to deal with a pawn check. So let's take a look at what that would have looked like. So let's go back a move. So let's say white puts the knight here, and then the bishop comes in. This is actually really good, right? Because here you could just simply push the pawn, and the bishop has to retreat back. So again, didn't really lose anything out of that, and didn't commit this A pawn, which you may want to push 2 squares later on anyway. Computer suggesting a tactical line here that I didn't see. It's suggesting knight to E5, so sacrificing the bishop. So let's see what that looks like. Bishop takes E1, and then knight takes D7. Bishop takes F2 with check. King goes to F1. And now bishop takes D4. So just trying to gain as much material here. So in this position, white's black's ahead. But if we capture with check, bishop captures, and now bishop captures again, bishop captures. Computer says that white is still way ahead here because of the queen capture, right? And so here we end up with a position, and of course this finishes off something like this, and white's ahead, but there was a lot of moves there. That was a lot of moves. That's all computer stuff. That's not, I don't think that's really realistic. So all of that was a for instance, didn't happen in the game. Instead, A3 was played, bishop to B7, whole point of playing b6, so this was kind of makes a lot of sense. At some point might sacrifice itself, trade on f3 to try and open up this king position. And that just feels really passive. You already had the queen attacking, protecting that square, so you weren't in real danger of losing this pawn structure. Your bishop was on a good square. It was really active. Counting is a really important aspect of the game. If we look at the bishop before, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 squares that it's attacking. It's attacking one of the enemy pieces. And yes, these two squares, so this square and this square, are adequately defended. So is this one. But once we move the bishop, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 squares, or 3 squares that we control here, and we have 4 others that we have some sort of control on. After this move, we have 1, 2, 3 squares that we control, one that we already controlled. That one isn't really doing anything for us. So that one doesn't do anything for us because that was already controlled. And then we have this square here that was equally defended in both cases. So we've gone from having 3 full squares that we control. Again, this one isn't any different in either case. So bishop is doing less. Don't love that move. We can see the computer didn't love it either. Went from a slight advantage for white to basically a dead even position. All right, let's see what black does to respond. Starts the attack. They were behind in development, and a passive move kind of let them finish up. Their bishop is still on this back. Also, I mean, you're not finished your development either. Your queen's not off this back rank because you moved the rook. So as we look at this, we have 2 rooks. They're not connected yet. The queen, not quite sure where it wants to go yet. Probably is going to end up here with a rook behind it. But black says, I've gotten enough of my development done that I can start an attack. So capturing, that's fine. Generally, you don't want to give away a center pawn for an outside pawn. This is usually good for black. Might have been able to do... I was contemplating something like d5 here, but I think d5 just fails due to counting, because there's 1, 2, 3 attackers on the d5 square, and only 2 pieces are supporting. So it's a very simple tactical idea, just counting. But I don't think that was the right idea. So the only other idea that you might have is to try and do something else more productive. But again, I'm not sure where the rooks want to belong yet. And you've got this bishop here that you could consider exchanging. I'm not sure that's the right idea. Or you could try and find a better place for it, but I don't think I found one. So, yep, capturing is okay. Lack of other options, I think that makes sense. So captured. Black captures here, offering a queen trade. I'm guessing black is going to be okay with a draw. Getting the queens off early seems a little A little anticlimactic, but I guess it can work. So queen trades. Rook came over, and I think that's the right rook to capture with. There's now 2 open files here, so the second rook is probably going to want to go on the c file. So I do think that's the right rook to move from the black side. And now white needs to figure out what they're doing. They've got their rooks connected finally. The development is done. We are fully in a middle game position now. The queens are off the board. And so a lot of this is going to come down to piece placement, how the pawns are going to work together. Both have decent structures. There's 2 pawn islands here. So we have 3 versus 2 here and 4 versus 3. Black's bishop here's a little bit more active. This one is really passive, but white has a really passive bishop and a pretty active bishop. White's knights are both centered really nicely, and black's knights are centered pretty nicely. So all in all, really a really even position, and the next maybe 10 moves are probably going to really dictate the direction of this game. So challenging the center right away, I think that's okay. This is probably going to be a really important diagonal right here. So this diagonal here, whoever controls that controls the center of the board. So that's probably a really good idea to say, I don't want you to have that for free. Interesting. So the idea here is, and I guess black realized it, if black captured here, you could just recapture and then the file is white's. They could still try and add pressure in the center, but the black knight now is attacking 2 pieces. Both of them are defended, so it's not really for free. So it's not really a tactical fork so much as it's just putting pressure on the squares. They're probably okay trading this knight for this bishop, or even here. Let's show what this might look like. So if the knight takes on e4, this one can't recapture here, because then the bishop is lost and you're down a piece. So there's no really way to make that work out for you. So that's not going to be the idea. But you could capture it with the bishop, at which point you've got an even position with even pieces, and you've traded off 2 knights that were both basically even before. So position's very even right here. So I think it's going to stay even for a bit longer. So knight captures. Oh, did that happen in the game? All right, let's make sure we're actually on the game here. Yep, knight captured. That happened in game. And now bishop capture also happened. And so we can see really even position still. Though the knight trade just kind of gets us closer to an endgame. I feel like it might have been better to try and keep pieces on the board if you're still trying to win this. Trading everything down, getting down to a really even endgame is probably just going to result in a draw. So white pushes the pawn to save it from being captured. Was there any other ideas here? Do something different? Not really. Maybe c4 instead. But I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference. The idea behind c4 is that you could do b4 and then push it again and maybe try and make this majority that you have here 3 versus 2 and try and get one of those pawns to be a passed pawn. And that would really restrict what black could do. But I don't see anything wrong with that. Again, I think the position's really even. There's no major threats at this point that I can see. So, black is tired of this bishop being such a pain. Kicks it. Interesting. So retreating back, keeping the pressure on, and saying, go ahead, open up your king side. That's good for me. And usually that's a solid idea, is that if the king gets opened up, the one thing about that is when the king gets opened up in the opening with the queen still on the board, there's a lot of risk. When you open up the king side, it actually helps the king. The king is a powerful piece. Use it. So as you guys are heading towards an end game, having an active king is actually really good for you. It can be worth up to like 4 pawns worth of material to have a really active king versus a passive king. So you're kind of inviting this pawn to come out, giving another tempo, and possibly letting the king get more active in the game quickly. So offers the trade of bishops. Not sure about that. I don't think I love that move. Trying to complicate the position, but trading off this bishop that was the good bishop for a bad bishop, so that makes sense, I guess. So trade. So white's bishop's here in the center. This bishop isn't doing a whole lot yet. So looking at white's worst piece, I'd say it's that bishop. It's doing a job here to keep this pawn structure together. So now we need to think about how is white going to improve this bishop. Probably going to need to move this knight. Maybe here, maybe there. And find a way to really activate these rooks because they're a little passive on the back. There's a lot of pressure here in the center. Both sides are kind of waiting to capture. There you go. Knight. Beautiful place for the knight. Like I said, I thought that was a good place. The other idea might have been here. Could have gotten kicked pretty quickly. So I think that's a fine idea. D4 there. Bishop retreats. Wasn't really under attack there, but it could have been. The idea being that if the bishop moves over here, it starts to really put a cramp on some of the squares that black wants to use, and it opens up an attack, kind of limiting the squares that the black bishop could go to. So interesting. So you just made your bishop better by opening that up, and now you're instantly going to trade it. I guess that's fine. It's going to be hard to win this, though. When you run out of pieces, it's kind of headed straight for a draw. So you've got 3 pieces, 3 pawns to 2 pawns. Black's already protecting and supporting the 2 pawns. So maybe there's going to be an exchange of rooks, and then put the other rook behind the pawns, try and get one to be a passer. I guess he just doesn't want, so the idea being that if you go ahead and push the b4 pawn, or push the pawn up to b4, it lets that hang. So he's trying to say, no, I don't want you to move that pawn majority. This would probably be a great time to capture that d8 rook. A little prophylactic move, that's fine. Not a whole lot's happening yet, but giving your king a safety square to run out if a rook gets in the back row really helps prevent those back rank gotcha mates. You get too focused on what you're doing and then you get mated on the back row. So that makes sense to push your h3. I'm okay with that. Knight trying to activate itself, come more towards the center. It's not a great square though, because all of these squares are already owned by white. So I'm not sure what it's hoping to accomplish there yet. Well, there you go. What it accomplished was breaking down that attacking line, and now white was able to push that b4 with the idea that maybe c4, c5 is coming. One of these rooks is going to have to come behind. It's going to be hard to hang on to it otherwise. So king starts coming to the center. As I said, the king can be a powerful piece. It's important to use it. We're definitely heading into an endgame here. 2 rooks and a knight versus 2 rooks and a knight. This is going to be a really even position. So maybe the king can kind of get into balance here. I think you might have been better off here with the king move. Usually when one side moves the king, it's a good time for you to move your king as well. If they're saying, I'm going to bring my king to the center, you can bring your king to the center, and it turns out to be kind of a race to the center of the board sometimes. And then it kind of turns into, okay, so let's jockey for position. A few more pieces get traded. But if you could get that king all the way over here, then you've got a really strong position to try and get one of these 3 pawns to become passers. So just an idea that might have been a better line to consider. So instead you brought the knight out. I don't love that move. So when you bring the knight here, you're inviting the knight to capture. If you capture back this way, you have an isolated pawn in the middle of the board. It's now unsupported. This is going to be a target. So let's just go ahead and show what that looks like. So this has already happened. Knight captures, pawn captures, and then you could do something as simple as attack it from the side. You could do something like this and stack in front of it. But yeah, I don't think trying to trade that knight is the right idea. Again, I think the king idea might be better. Move the rook behind the c pawn might also be an idea. Yeah, so let's see what happened in the game. We had d4 played. There we go. Good move played by black. So let's see, how did white respond here? Captured with the pawn. Again, that pawn capture, I don't think keeps the rook on the board. That was kind of the whole idea behind why I thought the knight move wasn't great. So if we look at the engine, it's saying that black has the advantage. I would agree with that. That isolated pawn in the center is just going to become an attacked piece. So let's see, how does black try and capitalize? Comes down to c3. Attacks the a3 pawn. So probably the idea here is that if white pushes the pawn, then it can come to c4, and then it can either pick up this pawn or that pawn. So that's probably what black is thinking. Obviously, white doesn't have to push that pawn. It could support it with a1, or it could do something like e3, offer the trade, and bring that pawn closer to the center. And so it's at least a supported pawn. It is 3 islands of pawns, but it's at least supported. So let's see what white decided to do. Nice. I think that's a good move. So we had e3. Is black going to trade rooks, or is he going to retreat? Let's see. Retreats back, says this is going to be my square. So white is probably going to defend. My guess is go something like that. Yep. So we have, this is a really key square now. And so, as I said a few moves ago, that knight move really kind of dictated the direction of this game. This is a weak pawn. 4 versus 3 here, 2 versus 2 here. So now I think it's going to be a race who can get the king involved first. Whichever king is more active is probably going to win that square and win that pawn. Black has a little bit of an edge because they moved first. This king isn't. So if we look, there's 1, 2, 3 moves before you can defend that pawn with your king. And black can 1, 2, 3 moves attack the pawn. So right now it's going to be a foot race. Depends on who gets that idea first. Interesting. I don't know why they did that. That makes no sense to me. I think that's retreat the bishop, retreat the rook. Maybe the plan is to bring it here, but it wasn't really. It's not going to do any more here than it did back here. And at least in this position, these pawns couldn't like start moving. So I think that was just a mistake on black's part, running out of ideas on what to do. So taking advantage of black's mistake, pushing the pawn, saying, I'm not going to let you keep the majority. We'll trade off the pawns and probably a rook, and we'll head to a really drawish game. So let's keep looking. Supports it. So was taking here an option? So if you take here, so let's just look at that. If you take here, black is winning. Simple counting. 2 pieces were attacking the rook, only 1 defender. So that's not an option. So what options does white have here? There's now an open file. If white can get a rook onto c7 and maybe a second rook actively on this 7th rank, that could be a really strong position since there's still 3 pawns sitting back here. So those would be great targets. So maybe something on the c file. Let's see. Is there any saving of this pawn that you've now pushed? You can't capture. There's no pawns that moves that could protect it. No, I don't see a good way to do that. So let's see. What did white decide to do? So white decided to play c3. So c3, solid move. At least that it's in line with what I was thinking. Is there a reason why c3? What would the computer was saying? c1. Okay. So why c1 over c3? Or, well, the computer says there's not a whole lot of difference. So no, that's fine. So rook to c3. I think that's fine. Black just invited the same problem that you had, which was, here, let me isolate this pawn in the center of the board. Now that's the target that you get to target from white's side. Probably would have been better to capture with the rook and then recapture after you take. So let's just show that for a second. I think this probably would have been better for black. Like I said, I think the rook comes in here, targets some squares, probably push the pawn, and then there'll be some exchanges, left with 2 pawns on this side of the board. Black's rook is active, and the 4 versus 3 majority. The winning chances are still with black. It should be a draw probably with best play. So I don't like that move. I don't think it was best. There we go. Think that's a great square for that rook. The computer wanted the other rook to stop the pawn from moving. I think that's a very natural move. Again, attacking the pawns back here feels like a very solid idea. This pawn is definitely a monster, though. So paying attention to what's going to happen with it. So depending on what happens, this could be a problem, because 1, 2, 3 moves, and the pawn is a baby queen. So black says, I don't like you on the 7th rank. We get a trade. All right, now it's time. Whose king is going to get more active? That's what all this comes down to. If black can use the king and the rook to march that pawn down, it should be a win for black. If white can get the king up and stop that pawn from moving, it should be a draw. So the king moves. I think that's the right idea. King moves. King, king, king. Okay, so the rook is probably going to come in here and try and cut this off, or come here and try and pick up that pawn. So 2 different ideas depending on where the king is. So stopping the idea of check. Let's see, was there a different idea you could have done? King up doesn't work because the rook can just push it right back. No, I'm not seeing anything. No, I'm okay with that. I don't see anything a whole lot better. I know the computer's saying things, but okay, now you've got G5 with the idea that push these pawns, either turn one of them into a passer or lock up the position here, and it really makes it all about that pawn. G3, I think that's fine. F5, F4. I think that's probably good for black. The idea being that captures, and then there's another way for the rook to get in. So I think what might have been better is maybe something like f3 or I don't love h3, h4 either. Could have done something like king f3. I don't love how passive this rook is, so I wonder if there's a way to be more active with your rook. I don't see great places for your rook right now. Maybe something like a4, and if the rook comes down, you block with the rook, and there's a possible trade-off. Not sure that's great either, though. Yeah, so f4 happens. Interesting. I guess thinking that they might be able to try and win this, but it's currently adequately defended. 2 defenders, 2 attackers, so not really at risk of losing it, but it does make the king have to stay here. Okay, I think that's okay. h4, offering to really tie up the position. I think that's okay. Yeah, so black is saying I'm okay with the position getting locked up. Now this pawn is undefended. Leaving it here, it was defending. It was defended. But now, if this rook can get back, this pawn is a liability. So I can see why the computer is saying that that might be a mistake. Because if black comes here, white's position is more solid. There's only one piece to defend. It guards both of these. There's 2 pieces that black has to defend. Okay, black is immediately trying to attack the weakness that white has just made. And the king moving to the center of the board. White's already a pawn down and is doing nothing to stop capturing that one. Oh, interesting. So that seems like the right idea. Then you have a check. Trying to get your rook more active in the position. So king just moves over, continues to protect the pawn here. All right, what's white's move here? White attacks the weakness. Like I said, black had two pawns that were weak. White only had the 1, but now has 2. And this would probably be an amazing turn if black doesn't capture this pawn right now. This is probably a really tough position for black. So let's see what they do. They capture it. So black still has a slight edge. Up 2 pawns. But now it's going to be hard to get this rook out without dropping this pawn. So black's kind of got a puzzle to figure out here. White looks like they might be able to hold this a little bit. The king here in the center, the rook, tying the king down. It can't leave or it drops the pawn. The rook can't leave or it drops the pawn. So this looks like a really tough position for black to try and win, even though they're up two pawns. So capture with check. Comes over, defends the pawn, gives check, and looks like they're offering a draw. That seems like a weird idea. I mean, the repetition here. I think if black had decided to come here to f7 and then bring the knight or the rook back into the game, this pawn might have been able to do something. So I think black still has ideas of how to win. I think white is very happy to get out of this game with a draw. Yeah, so, and it did end up ending in a draw. So, overall, what do we think? The opening, we had a Scandinavian. So we had a very nice position. Starting out, white had the advantage in the opening. Played really solidly. Only a couple moves that I questioned a little bit, but honestly played it really solidly. So I'm thinking the opening says solid intermediate player. Then we went into the middle game. And that middle game position, after the queens exchanged, there was a few inaccuracies on both sides here. So I think that's going to cap what we're looking at. I think when we look at this position and we go tactically, white didn't lose material. So tactically, they're very sound. So that makes me think that they're at least 14, 15, 1600. But what they're missing is moves like this, where bringing that knight out creates a weakness. So I think those types of things where positionally knowing what type of endgame you want to head towards or how you want to approach it is limiting the ideas of what the rating of this player is. So if we continue through, I think this was fairly well played. Again, I think that was a questionable move. It's a little hard to come up with good moves in this position, and so it might have just been a part of time trouble. I'm not sure how long this game was, but we're getting close to the 40 move mark. So I think that was a great resource. That was a great idea. Wins the pawn back. Again, I think black may have still had some winning chances here, but then this is just heading straight for a draw. So, all in all, solidly well played. No real tactical mistakes. The only mistakes that I think were made were strategic. And if we have strategic mistakes, I would say that we're probably looking at someone 1650, 1700 is my guess. Chess.com rating. So yeah, I'm going to go, I bet this person might be a 1650. All right. So go ahead, put into the comments what you think. Go ahead before we look at this together. Let's see what you guys think. So put that in the chat below. I think it's 1650. Put your guess. Let's go ahead and take a look. All right. So the game turned out to be between a 2000 and a 1988 player. Game 10. So decent amount of time here. There's the move that the computer says was the deciding move. So instead of g4, they're saying give check. Here, let's take a look at that position back on our original board. So instead they're suggesting come in here with the rook check. King's got to go somewhere. Let's bring it over to f3. Now a g4 check. Gives check. King's got to back up. So f2 or g2. I don't think it makes a whole lot of difference. And then this pawn can keep moving forward. Followed by the king. And that's going to be really tough because the rook can't stop the pawn from being promoted because the king is going to come over and just walk it over. And so this rook is going to get sacrificed for the pawn, and there's nothing white can do about it. So black had this game won. They had a missed win there. Computer says it was a 2150 versus 2200. So both of them played above their rating according to the computer. As I said, I thought it was a 1650. I thought it was a very sound tactical game, and there were some strategic pieces that were missed. Time pressure can always be a part of that. But overall, if you want to be a part of our next subscriber Guess the ELO, go ahead and put it into the spreadsheet below. Edit the PDF so that the names and ratings are hidden as we go ahead and review the position, and give me a link to the original game so that I can look that up after. Okay, so if you enjoyed this, like, subscribe, follow, and I will see you guys next time. Have a great day.